All right, everybody, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Allison McWilliams, and I am so glad that you all have chosen to join us today for our Wednesday webinar. I did want to do a little bit of housekeeping before we kick this off. As I said, you all should be muted and your videos off, but unfortunately, since we had to change the Zoom info right there at the last minute. I didn't update those settings. So I'm going to do my best to manage that as we go. But if you could also just make sure that you are staying muted, that you're keeping your videos off, that would be great. I will also be managing the chat box. So if you have questions as we go, please put those in there. And if we have time, we're going to do our best to get to those at the end, but if not, we will certainly get to them in the follow-up. Also, if you have any issues as we go, put those there, and I will do my best to help you with that. I just want to take a moment to say a word on behalf of our team, myself, along with my colleagues Lauren Beam and Megan Hoyt. Manage the Mentoring Resource Center and the Alumni Personal and Career Development Center at Wake Forest, which bring you these Wednesday webinars. And in that work, we get to work across students, faculty, staff, and alumni, helping all of the individuals in our community think about how they're growing their careers and growing their lives. And that is what this work is all about. So today we are so excited to be joined by Kristen Winkle-Beck, who is a fabulous Wake alumna, the CEO of Pivot Point Professionals, a coaching and consulting firm, as well as the executive director of Social Venture Partners Charlotte. I don't want to give away too much here because I want Kristen to share her story. But I first met her a few years ago in a mentoring workshop I was leading, and when I heard about the intentional pivot that she was making and how she was doing it, I kind of wasn't interested in leading a mentoring workshop anymore. And every time I introduce Kristen to someone, the reaction is pretty much the same, which is, we can do that? And how do you do that? And that's why she's here to tell us how she has done this work and to maybe give us each a little bit of permission to consider it in whatever ways we want to do that. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Kristen for the next 30 minutes or so. And thank you, Kristen, for being here.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And that mentoring meeting, it felt like the world sort of stood still, and and Allison and I had our own little conversation just about what it means to really take a hard look at where you are. And it was a couple years after that, as you'll find out, but when I named my business Pivot Point Professionals, that word was not really used. Now it's really sort of overused, or it can be overused. But I still hold true and find the word appropriate and applicable. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you for giving up some of your very precious and valuable time. It is truly an honor, and I hope it will be a good use of your time. So what I thought we'd do is, as Allison said, my career kind of took a number of twists and turns. So I'll share a little bit about my story and how I learned to navigate. The crux of what I'm going to really talk about today have come as a result of my work and my personal experience, as well as experience throughout my 20 years in corporate America, along with coaching clients in the executive and career coaching space. But at the end of the day, I want you to walk away with something that you can incorporate, or some kind of thought-provoking concept that you could evaluate for your own self. No one cares more about your life and your career than you do. And so, as Allison said, I don't know what it is about some of us, but we need that permission to be introspective and be a little bit protective of our space in our lives. And then, of course, the importance of expanding your network. I'll also share with you some of my favorite resources that I've leveraged over the last several years in navigating it. So without further ado, I'm going to just share with you my roadmap. And if this slide looks messy, that's because it kind of was. As Allison mentioned, I graduated from Wake with a psychology degree, and was recruited off campus. It's always been about people and about developing others. I sort of happened into financial services, going to work with some of the largest financial institutions in the country. And so you'll see I was recruited out of college off of campus by Capital One. And then I moved to Charlotte working for Bank of America, and kind of was on a very traditional, trajectory, working in a variety of ways, managing others, learning to manage vendors and supplier relationships. And I would say the first time I made a really intentional move for career growth was I had to move to Charlotte for personal reasons. And then when I went to work for GE, it was a really big growth opportunity. But you know what, that growth opportunity, while it was amazing, it was followed by one of the first sort of unwanted circumstances that required my first pivot. And it was 2008, the very front end of the recession. And I was forced to pivot. I got laid off. My job was eliminated. My division was shut down. And so in 2008, fortunately, I was on the front end of that. I was able to come back to Charlotte and back to Bank of America, where I had a long and productive career, largely in the electronic payments sector, growing progressively in my management responsibilities and gaining exposure to international work. And it was a great, fulfilling ride, until I started to get this restlessness about my spirit in about 2016. And I just couldn't see what was next. I was struggling with, is this it? Like, I had risen to the ranks of, SVP, which was something that I had aspired to for a long time and had worked progressively towards, but I just had a restlessness about my spirit. And so it was during a personal retreat that I started to think about what might be next. And every fiber of my being kept feeling like it wasn't more responsibility or a different company in the same industry or the same sector. So it was through some reflection, and quite honestly, through the plan that I created, that led me to explore. Wake Forest has a nonprofit business essentials leadership program at the Charlotte City Center in Charlotte. And so I explored that program, enrolled in that, and completed it. I was still employed full-time while I did that. And it was during that time I started to really get re-energized about how I was using my brain and my management experience, my leadership experience, all of that kind of building upon where I was. And so what I thought was going to be like a decision point of like, okay, you're going to leave corporate America, you're going to go work in nonprofit, actually ended up being something completely different. Through a lot of prayerful discernment and talking with others and networking, I decided that my real pivot was going to be to step back. And that's, as Allison said, that's where I met her. It was during my sabbatical year in 2018, where I just had planned and had prepared to take a step back and really evaluate what was next for me. During that time, I did a lot of networking. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of resting. But it led me to back to kind of my core of why I was a psychology major at Wake, why I was enjoying the leadership and management positions, because it was about developing others. It was about collaborating with others. So in 2018 and 2019, I enrolled in some International Coach Federation coaching certification programs and became a certified coach. I launched my business in the summer of 2018, Pivot Point Professionals, which I still have today. And enjoyed working with other executives and careers that were kind of struggling with the same thing I was. They weren't personally fulfilled, or they were looking to get to the next level, but were kind of struggling to get there, or just wanted to start aligning their priorities with their passion and their purpose. Because we say one thing, and then sometimes we look at our lives and those actions don't match up. It was during I guess about a year in, that I really missed the collaboration, and I really missed working as part of a team. And a unique opportunity came up, and I became the executive director for Social Venture Partners, which is a nonprofit venture philanthropy here in Charlotte that invests and strengthens other nonprofits. So in October of last year, I made yet another pivot into the nonprofit sector. And what I love about this work is it's meaningful. It leverages all of my collective and acquired experience. It allows me to keep my coaching practice. It allows me to do things like being here with you today. And I have a really, now I have a really sort of robust and full career experience. But my story is still being written, and so is yours. So will I be in this role forever? I don't know. For now, it is definitely the right place for me to be. And I remain open and optimistic about, what will I be here 5 years, 10 years? Will I retire? Who knows? I don't know what the future holds, but for now, I'm in the right place doing the right thing. So hopefully that gives you a sense of some of these pivots I chose. Some were thrust upon me. Regardless of why you're contemplating a pivot, I want to be here to help offer some suggestions and some tips. One of the things that, regardless of whether it's a proactive or reactive change that you're in the process of, your mindset really does matter. Make sure that you're surrounding yourself with supportive people. Your situation is unique and personal to you. So you have to take a look at, your personal finances, your other commitments and family obligations, a timeline, all the things that factor in. Think about it in totality. Don't just look at it myopically from a career perspective, but really look at it in the context of how does your career and your work fit into your life? Clarifying those priorities. Some things are must-haves and some things are nice-to-haves. And I found some exercises by writing those things down and being really clear about what your non-negotiables are and what your preferences are, and knowing, what things you may have to compromise on, or you might be willing to, make an adjustment for something else, but just be clear about what your priorities are. The other thing that people don't often do is they're focused on so much on what they've done in the past and not necessarily skills or experiences or things that you're obtaining right now or where you want to go. So just because your job description, fit that of an accountant doesn't mean that you don't have skills that are transferable or that you hadn't performed functions or duties that would be applicable to your new desired track, say in human resources or something of that nature. Really, you want to don't get so mired down in the detailed nuances of what your job description was. Talk more about your experience and the skills that you have or you're obtaining. Be open to new contacts and opportunities. That mentoring meeting with Allison McWilliams in May of 2018, it was unexpected, and it's created a great friendship and a lot of collaboration opportunities. And she helped me a lot in my search for the next opportunity that ultimately landed me in the nonprofit sector. So just be open to meeting new people and new opportunities that you might not have considered. The other piece is really being open to feedback and asking for people's input, asking for others who know you well, for their observations and their input along the way. And the crux of what we're going to talk about today is creating an action plan. And in this action plan, I would really encourage you, focus on the next right step that you can take. Don't get so far out into your plan and get so worried about creating the most beautiful, perfect, detailed, step by step by step. Sometimes just doing the next right thing, as long as you're taking action, is where you need to be focused on. I would encourage you not to isolate yourself, especially if the circumstances that you're facing right now are hard or challenging or messy or not too glamorous. Doesn't mean you have to splash it all over your LinkedIn page or all over your social media, but do lean into those that are your champions. Those are your cheerleaders. I would be remiss in saying if my little nice, neat, tidy, messy career path wasn't filled with highs and lows. So make sure that you've got some cheerleaders and some champions in your corner to help bolster you during the tough times. One of the biggest challenges that people face is I'm just looking for something new. I'm really open to anything. Those are difficult things for others to help you achieve. So I would really encourage you to resist the temptation to be too general I would encourage you to narrow your focus and really try to, maybe you focus on 3 different industries if you just want to change industries, or if you're looking at some new job families or titles, you want to go from an accountant to a project manager, think about a couple of job descriptors or job titles that you might narrow your focus on. You can always change them out if you decide those aren't working, but it's really hard to pursue the general, I'm open to anything. And it's hard for other people to help you with that. Don't allow your research and planning to keep you from taking action. We can all fall victim to analysis paralysis. And really, you want to make sure that perfection is the enemy of done sometimes. So make sure that you're doing your due diligence and you're planning and your research, but also don't hide behind that. Make sure that you're doing something and taking tangible actions forward. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what some of those action steps might be. I mentioned this earlier, but don't cling too tightly to your plan. Sometimes the best laid plans, blow up and result in something better than you expected. So be open to that plan. Directionally you want to follow the plan, but if something takes you slightly off course, but it's worth exploring and it feels in alignment with what your goals are, then what's the harm in exploring it? Maybe it's a dead end, but you get right back on the path and you keep on trucking. You will have another data point to bring into your experience and to help inform your next steps and to correct whatever trajectory or path you're on. And then I would also say, don't overlook short-term opportunities. You don't know who that might introduce you to. You don't know what organizations it might introduce you to. You might miss skill building opportunities. Just because something looks very, very short-term doesn't mean it can't turn into something longer term, or it can't lead to something or someone that might help you in, obtaining your longer term goals. So I mentioned before that I've marked out and drafted up a plan clear back in the summer of 2016. And really this is the framework of the plan that I created for myself. It started with, what skills do I need to learn, right? So I took a hard look. At the time I was exploring the nonprofit sector. What were skills that I needed? It was this very opportunity that led me to Wake Forest certificate program. But you might have to do some research here, but what skills do you need to learn or obtain? Who do you know is a resource? The who part can really support a lot of the other components of your action plan, but it's helpful to take an inventory about who you know and who might be a resource. The last one, or the third one, is really around obtaining experience or practice. How can you start to take steps, taking action to give yourself exposure and experience in the direction that you're headed? And then last but certainly not least, and it is one that we tend to forget most often, is how can you measure your progress? How will you know if you're headed in the right direction or if you're even moving at all? So we're going to take these 4 steps and break them down in a little bit greater detail. So as I mentioned, what skills do you need? My first, literally, I remember Googling like nonprofit programs, and ironically, the Wake Forest Charlotte program popped up. So, that doesn't have to be a certification or an actual formal in-person training program. It could be in the form of podcasts, or there's tons in this sort of pandemic that we're in the midst of. There's lots and lots of content and relatively inexpensive content for you to gain exposure, for you to learn and start to explore new skills. If you like to read, check out your library, check out popular reading lists, talk to people that are in that world and books they would recommend. But do your research and start to do an honest assessment of how your skills, your current skill inventory, lines up with the skills that you might need going forward. And then, make a plan to start, obtaining those skills. Networking. We're going to actually talk a little bit more about this in a few slides in terms of how to expand your network. But this is really about, who do you know? Who are your existing contacts? Who are your mutual connections with close family members or others? Allison, Megan, and Lauren are phenomenal resources. And the Wake Forest Alumni Personal and Career Development Center is one of the best. So make sure you're fully leveraging that and all of the connections that they have and the introductions they may be able to make for you. If you're looking to change industries or you're looking to really change functionally, don't forget about seeking out where the industry, your intended or desired target industry, where do those experts hang out? You know, are there certain resources, publications, groups on LinkedIn, meetings in your city when meetings become a thing again, or there might be virtual meetings. But think about where the experts in your industry are and where they get their information or where they gather, and then think about how you can connect there. Trade associations are another easy thing, is you literally put in the industry and like association behind it and see what pops up. So those are great places to find resources, to find connections, to find people that you either know or would like to know there. But they're all great resources to ask them about their personal career journey, to ask them what skills they would recommend or what the first steps might be for you to take. Your network is an untapped resource when you're looking to make a major pivot. This third one is not something that people always think about, but it's critically important when you're, especially when you're acquiring new skills and you're really trying to demonstrate some proficiency and some movement into a new role or into a new job field. How can you practice or obtain experience? What are some ways that you can start to demonstrate that you have the capabilities or the potential capabilities to make this move? We're living in the gig economy, and there's opportunities to set up. If you're a really gifted writer and you're wanting to make a pivot out of your existing career field and you want to start writing, maybe you start doing some freelance writing opportunities. If you're a creative person, there's all kinds of ways in which you can take whatever skills you have and interests and start to leverage them in new and small ways. Those, might be paid. If you don't have the confidence or don't feel like you have the skill yet to get there, then I would encourage you to think about skill-based opportunities to volunteer your time. This is a great way to demonstrate proficiency and real-world experience, even if you're not paid. This was a big part of my transition into the nonprofit sector, was as I created my personal plan, one of the big things was, how do I get involved deeply, much more deeply? If I wanted to become someone who worked in the nonprofit sector, how do I become more ingrained in the organizations or seeing that work up close? And so volunteering is a great way to offer my skills or to offer your skills and get exposure to people in the particular field that you're interested in. And last but certainly not least, if you're not scheduling in this time, this holds true for any of the steps in your action plan. You always want them to be time bound and try to carve out some time on your personal schedule to do the work, but really being intentional about when will you do this work and how will you do it, and make sure that you're leaving enough space in your life to actually practice and to actually gain some experience. That's one that if you're not intentional about it, it may not happen. And then the last one is, how do you measure your progress? I think with any development plan, it's great to have the research and the people and what you're going to do, but where you can sometimes fall short is if you don't take a step back and actually measure your progress. What can you do? Can you engage accountability partners? Can you ask a friend who may be going through something similar, or ask a friend who you just trust and who's vested in your success to do that? Maybe you need to invest in a coach. That might be a real career coach like myself, or it might be a skill-based coach around starting a business, or depending on what you're looking to do. We all spent money and invested in our Wake Forest education. And sometimes, continuing, it's really important to continue to invest in yourself as you look to grow your skills and as you look to take your career to the next level. Last but not, seeking feedback along the way is really important. And then if there are metrics or things that you can do that start to help you identify whether or not you're really making progress, think about how you might quantify it. Now, I'm not a fan of metrics for metrics' sake, but I will tell you that what doesn't get measured sometimes doesn't get managed. So look for those opportunities to really measure your progress. I talked earlier about the importance of expanding and who do you know. This is just a great visual in a way that helps you to think about how big is your circle, how big is your network. Anytime you're making a career move, but especially when you're making a significant pivot, it's going to be really important to expand your reach. And many of us like to live in the gray. We like to stay close with our family and our best friends and our closest coworkers and our mentors. We like to keep that circle tight. And while they're very, very helpful, I will tell you that most of your expansion and most of your real reach with your network will happen in the periphery. So rather than staying super connected to those strong ties and relying only on those in the gray circles, which are your strongest ties, I would encourage you to really get outside your comfort zone and start to explore contacts that you know in those weaker ties, which are in the yellow circles on the outside. That's going to be where most of your growth happens. Someone like Allison can connect you with someone else, or people that you meet through the Alumni Association, the alumni chapter in your City of Wake Forest alumni. Just thinking about, and hopefully this visual has given you some suggestions or ideas. What I like to suggest people do is put 2 or 3 names in each one of those circles. And if you do that, you come up with, another 15 or 16 contacts that you might not have ordinarily thought of in your plan. So I really encourage you that you can't do this alone. You've got to seek out resources. As I promised, these are just some of my favorite books and tools and podcasts. I will put the disclaimer on this. A lot of these are oriented towards personal development and leadership and less towards specific career movement. But whatever modality you like to use, whether it's reading or whether it's podcasts, a couple things I'll highlight is if you're really not sure what your next move is, I highly encourage the StrengthsFinder assessment. It was developed by Don Clifton and Gallup. It's a great assessment to just really get some clarity about what some of your strengths are. And there's a number of books that support that as well. I've already sung the praises of the Alumni Personal and Career Development Center at Wake, but those ladies are amazing and they know lots and lots of tools. Probably one of my favorite and most critical tools is LinkedIn. If you're not using Premium as a job seeker or someone looking to make the shift, I would encourage you to do that. I think they're still offering the 30-day trial period. Make sure your profile is robust before you start the 30-day trial. You want to get maximum exposure. And that gives you access to their entire library of web-based training. And then I'm a big podcast junkie. And so these are some of my favorite podcasts listed here. And last but certainly not least, if you want to connect, I will tell you my biggest pet peeve in life is people who just send generic LinkedIn requests. So anytime you ask to connect with somebody on LinkedIn, please personalize the invite. Let them know how you met or why you want to connect with them. So I would invite all of you to send me a connection request. Let me know you attended the webinar and you're a Wake person and you want to connect. You're welcome to reach out to me directly. I've listed my email address here. And part of anytime anybody considers working with me, I want to make sure it's a good fit. I want to make sure that I can really help you. And so I'm happy to do a complimentary sort of pivot strategy session with you, and you can schedule that through my website. But I hope I've given you some ideas. Allison, I don't know if there's questions that have come in. If you want me to, I think we have a couple minutes.
There is one question. If you could say a little bit more about LinkedIn Premium. So what does Premium offer besides free messaging to people who you are not connected to and LinkedIn Learning?
Sure. So Premium, there's a couple things that Premium does is obviously that in-mail piece, which is it gives you more opportunity to send messages to people you don't know. The library of learning is huge. The other thing it does is it gives you some analytics around who's looking at your profile. And what that can do is I'm not suggesting that you call out, hey, I saw you looked at my profile, but what it can do is be very helpful insight into whether or not the people that are looking at your profile are people that you would want looking at your profile. Meaning, if you're trying to make a shift into a new industry, are the people that are looking at your profile, are they recruiters? Are they people from those industries? And if they're not, it probably says more about what the contents of your profile are. And you need to start, and we could do a whole session on this, but you need to start having your profile reflect where you want to go and not just what you have done, right? So that gives you some analytics and gives you some data behind how much exposure you're getting and how, who's looking at your profile. The other thing it does is, these social media platforms all have algorithms and all have, behind the scenes ways that kind of dictate what posts get seen and what information gets shared and engaged with. And so those with premium profiles tend to be higher in the algorithm. So if a recruiter goes to search for project manager with medical device experience or something, then people with premium accounts tend to filter to the top of the search. And so for that reason, and I mean, as if that weren't enough, I really suggest anybody who's in the midst of looking for a new role or trying to make a transition that they have the premium.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, perhaps we'll bring you back to do a little more on LinkedIn. That would be great. So Kristen, thank you so much. So much great information in there. And yes, we will be sending out the slides. We like to clean up the closed captioning first and then get that out to all of you. You will get it in an email, but also then all of the recordings of all of these webinars live on our website as well. So you can go back and enjoy any of the previous ones. We hope that you will stay connected with us, whether it's on social or sign up for our e-newsletter. And I'll just make a quick personal plug for our webinar next week, which is going to be me talking about upskilling. So you've got your plan from Kristen, and now we're going to talk about how and why you should use this time that we're in to do some intentional work to fill those gaps so that when you're ready to make that pivot, you will be ready. So that's next Wednesday at noon, and I hope to see many of you there. And with that, we are going to close this out. So thanks, everyone, and I hope that you have a great day.